Number one, it's been almost a decade since the events that I'm writing about happened. Yet, I can recall them as if it happened yesterday, and some part of me believes they still lurk near and around me, like a fog of negative energy. 10 years ago, I was going through some hard times in my life. I had become a full-fledged alcoholic and my marriage was failing due to it. My wife seemed to be pulling away, and the only thing that comforted me was drinking alone as I worked late into the night on my computer. I was a system analyst who was constantly on call. At one point, I began to feel as if my wife was cheating on me. So before I left on a business trip out west, I decided to bug the phones to see if I could catch her in the act. Sure enough, when I got home, a day earlier than expected, and on July 4th, she wasn't home. I went to retrieve the tapes I had on the phone calls, and the very first message confirmed my suspicion. She was indeed having an affair, and with her boss. When she got home that night, fireworks were in the air all around the neighborhood. I confronted her and she broke down and told me the truth, and that she was pregnant with his child. I pretty much lost it right then and there. We didn't fight or argue. It was so surreal. I ran to the basement where my office was and began drinking heavily to try to dull the pain. I returned a bit later to see her packing. I told her I would leave for now and that she could stay. I asked for a hug and she said she didn't love me enough to give me one. This broke my spirit. I made my way slowly to the garage and was looking at the '69 Cougar I had been restoring. I had enough. I decided to hang myself at that point, and on the spur of the moment, not thinking too much about the act itself for the best way, I just grabbed a tall stool and placed it under a garage beam and climbed up with a roll of duct tape. I started frantically wrapping the roll around my neck, then the beam, and then more around my neck, making several passes each time. The tape was tight, and I ripped off the end and let it drop and leaned forward to kick out the stool. As soon as the stool fell, I felt the weight of my body and realized this was going to go quick. Then suddenly, as I swirled a bit in the air, I saw them. And I mean a lot of them. They were coming out of all corners of this poorly lit garage. Looking back, I can only describe them as shadow people, just like the movie Ghost. It wasn't their presence that scared me the most. It was their hideous laughter that spread fear up and down my body. I'd never been so afraid in all my life. Some came out and circled me. They were not tall like a man, more like 3 to 4 feet, deformed shapes and hunched over. One reminded me of the Coco Belly, but they were everywhere. I'd guess up to 15 or more. Some were actually peeking through the side window outside and laughing as well. They never touched me, but seemed to circle me as I swayed and hung there. The audible noises were so unreal and horrifying. They were groaning and laughing and snorting. In fear of it all, I slowly began fading out of consciousness. Next thing I knew, I was feeling the impact of the cold, hard cement floor in my garage. My wife, who was inside, came out and saw what I was doing. She tackled me with enough force it actually broke the beam and a lot of the tape. She was crying and slapping my face. She then hugged me. An ambulance came and got me later, and I went through intensive outpatient treatment over my mental state. I don't drink anymore. I also have a profound faith in God, but those shadow people or demons still spook me to this day. This is a story I don't tell too many people. I remember telling a doctor this story, and he chalked it up to a lack of oxygen going to my brain, causing me to hallucinate. I don't buy that though. I mean, I took a deep breath before jumping and they came out immediately. So, yeah, I do believe in them. What are they? I don't know. But to me, it was to take me to a place I didn't want to go. I'm happy I had another chance. Number 2. I'm 30 years old. When I was in high school, I had a long period of about 6 months when I was bothered by bad sleep disturbances. The first month, it wasn't so bad. 1 or 2 times a week, I would be woken up with a horrible pressure on my chest and an inability to move. Often, it would be very hard to breathe. It would be accompanied by sounds. Sometimes it was breathing. Often it was flies buzzing. Sometimes it was whispering. I was often frightened because I felt that if I let myself drift back to sleep while I was having difficulty breathing, I would die in my sleep. But I would only be awake for a short time. The auditory hallucinations would pass and the feeling of paralysis would depart all at once. Once I regained the ability to move and I could breathe again, I would feel exhausted and just drift instantly back to sleep. The first month, the things that happened to me matched the symptoms of sleep paralysis. About a month or so in, the sounds got worse. I could hear something speaking and something else responding. The sound of flies buzzing would be incredibly loud, and often, after the paralysis passed, I would go back to sleep, only to find myself instantly waking up again with another round of auditory hallucinations and paralysis. Also, the frequency increased to 3 or 4 times a week. One night, about 3 months in, while I was paralyzed, but most definitely awake, something pulled the covers off of me. Another night, I think that same week, it grabbed my crotch hard. It wasn't just a pain in that area. I felt its fingers. After that, during the bouts of sleep paralysis, I began to sense something standing at the foot of my bed, but I always averted my eyes. There were issues during the day too. We had a finished basement. Once when I was down there playing video games with my brother, I'd gone up to the kitchen to get snacks. I saw him. He was the only other person in the house. Came downstairs and went into the basement bedroom. I saw him out of the corner of my eye, just a blur, but making noise, and he closed the door. I had no idea why he would do that, but soon realized he hadn't. I went up to the kitchen and he was still there. When we checked the basement bedroom, it was empty. The worst night came about 4 months in. During my paralysis, I heard a horrible conversation in a guttural language I'm fairly sure I've never heard anywhere else. There was the same sound of flies buzzing in the background. It was so loud it hurt my ears. And then I realized that one half of the conversation in the horrible guttural language was coming from my own throat. That night, the thing was at the foot of my bed. I'd never looked directly at it, but that night, I had to. It was incredibly hard to move, but with my eyes, I looked at the foot of the bed. But once I did, I regretted it. It was only about 5 feet tall, but definitely with a person-like shape. It was black, like a shadow in 3 dimensions, a big, gaping absence of light. I did not feel I was looking at a ghost at all. I was certain that I was looking at had never, ever been human. Some of the descriptions I found online have mentioned a hat or clothing, but I didn't see anything like that. It was as if once I looked at it, it had seen me too. It walked around the side of my bed and sat on the side of the bed beside me. I could feel the depression in the mattress next to me. I tried to use all my strength to turn away just so I wouldn't have to look at it, but all I could move was my head. I closed my eyes shut. I remember being terrified that it would touch me. The conversation in the awful language had at least stopped coming from my throat. The thing was talking, though. After the paralysis passed, I jumped out of bed and turned on the lights. There was a definite depression in the bed, in the mattress and fitted sheet where the thing had been sitting. That was the worst night. I read aloud from the Dhammapada. I came from a Buddhist background, and it didn't bother me. After that, every time it came, once the paralysis passed, I would read from the Dhammapada. That always kept it from coming back the same night. I have to stress that in that time, I didn't think it was ever really gone. It was just hanging out, unseen, waiting to visit at night. The frequency of visits decreased, so did the intensity. This is going to sound very strange, but by the end, I wasn't particularly frightened of it. After 6 months, it would show up, and I wasn't afraid of it at all. I remember once or twice saying in my mind at least, "Oh, you again," and I'm certain it could hear me thinking that. The frequency fell to about once every 2 weeks. The last time I saw it, I got rid of it very quickly. The next morning, my brother, who had never seen the thing but had heard my stories about it, asked me without prompting. I had seen the thing last night. In the middle of the night, he'd woken up with a terrible feeling of dread to see a shadow moving around the edge of the walls and out the window. That was the last time I saw it for years. A few times in college, I had nightmares about it, but I think those were nightmares. I wasn't awake like the times in high school. I read about shadow people online afterward. I was relieved to find out that there's a rational explanation in a set of symptom lists. But 4 things bother me. The night the covers were pulled off of me, the day I saw it go into the basement bedroom, the night I saw a depression left in the sheets where it had sat, and the night my brother saw the thing too. The basement could probably be explained rationally. The night my brother saw it could be only a coincidence, but where he woke from a bad dream of sorts because hearing about it from me had planted the idea in his head. But by that point, I was only seeing the thing once every other week. What are the odds of us both hallucinating on the same night? As for the covers being pulled off of me and the depression in the mattress, I have no rational explanation at all. I suppose I could have imagined it, but it was real as anything that's ever happened to me in that day. Those were things I could touch. Nevertheless, I'd pretty much put it all behind me. Lately, I've been really worried. Recently, I was staying with a friend. We had a few drinks, but not too many. I was operating on very little sleep. I have a complete memory blackout of the evening, not warranted at all by the 3 drinks I had. He said that I became very strange and distant. At one point, I acted like I didn't recognize him. He said I seemed like a completely different person. That night, he had a horrible nightmare of a little man trying to grab his crotch. He says that when he went in the middle of the night to get water, he passed by me where I was sleeping on the couch and got a fright because for a moment he thought he saw someone standing nearby watching me. Recently, I've begun to see it again, on the periphery. Not the same night paralysis visits because that I know how to deal with. I feel like it's stalking me. Am I carrying something? I just want to know how to get rid of it. Hey guys, Scott here. Just wanted to take a minute and thank you for checking out this video. I've developed a strange affinity for these sorts of channels by listening to Lazy Masquerade and Be.Busta over the past few months. I decided to launch my own and release user-submitted stories regarding shadow people. I record all my own background music to make these stories a little more unique. Having grown up with a shit ton of paranormal encounters myself, I've always been intrigued by the topic. This is my first narrative video, so I'm sorry if it's a little awkward or choppy. I'm still getting the hang of it. Thanks to the users who submitted their encounters, and if you've got a story about shadow people you'd like to submit, send an email to the address on the screen. I'd love to hear about it. Thank you, and we'll see each other again soon. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, as I'm planning on releasing videos every week, if time allows. Anyway, thanks again.